Salama family, Salama, how you doing today? Hope you're blessed and highly favored. So today we're gonna talk about two videos that Pastor Fred Price Jr. had put out about Israelites in Africa. Now, I'm not here to beat up on the brother. I mean, be honest with you, that's probably one of the only few Christian ministries I have respect for, right? So, definitely his father, I have respect for him and his, even though he's dead now. And even Fred Price Jr., I have respect for him and, shout out for what he's doing, right? I mean, he's showing that there is a historical connection between Israelites and Negroes, right? The slave trade. Now, for me, I have just a few issues with, his research. Now, we have to ask, well, is it because, the pressure that if he comes out strong for Negroes being the true Israelites, that, he has to take it a step at a time and, basically feed, the uninitiated, if you want to call them that, the idea that the Negroes are the true Israelites. Maybe he's doing that. Or maybe he just haven't done the research yet and he has a long way to go. But I think it was sort of, bad scholarship or, for me to say that, and I hear this from the urban apologists as well, that everyone who came over in the Atlantic slave trade were not Israelites, right? So they make these statements that everyone who came over in the Atlantic slave trade were not Israelites. That's what they say. Okay, well, I'm like, okay, well, where's your proof? Where's your proof that they weren't? Now, think of this for a second, right? Okay, so could there have been one or two or three, maybe 10, who were not Israelites, who got caught up in it, who looked sort of like Israel? Some of those Egyptians, yeah, that's possible. But if I was targeting somebody, let's say, for example, let's say I was targeting Mexicans, and it's probably not the best analogy, but let's say I was targeting Mexicans for enslavement, and I went to Mexico and, and I just grabbed a bunch of people in Mexico and brought them over to Africa, right? And so then, you're going to say, well, everybody who was brought over to Africa were not Mexicans. Well, is it possible that a few people who weren't Mexicans got caught up in the grab? Yeah. So when they stole us, isn't it possible that a few people who were not Israelites got caught up in the Atlantic slave trade? Yeah. But think about it. If you had a few Hamites or whoever got caught up in the transatlantic slave trade who was brought over here who weren't Israelites, by the time all this was over, they were Israelites. After the third generation, they are considered Israelites. So, one of the things, and I'm going to show the video, and we're going to see where, the brother has a way to go in terms of the research. Now, like I said, I mean, everybody's learning. There's a let's say a long way to go for many of us. And so, I'm not hating. I'm not hating. Like I say, I respect the brother. I do. I respect him. I respect his ministry, and I respect his dad. So I have no problem with them. I just think that he should look further. So let's listen to some of this, and we're going to see why I have an issue with what he said, and maybe there's just a lack of understanding. So this is going to be the first video, and then I'm going to show part of the second video.
All right, we looked at the map of West Africa, because over probably the next maybe two to 4 weeks, we're gonna address a question about blacks in the Americas. These blacks, watch this. These blacks, like myself, who when we test our DNA, we all seem to find out that we're Nigerian. Well, how'd that happen? Matter of fact, I'm looking at Ghana right now. I'm 17% Ghanaian, 27% Nigerian. And that's probably the majority of you. If you've done your ancestry or your 23andMe, Nigeria and Ghana are in there. Nigeria was probably at the top of the list. In other words, West African territories. Okay. Now, verse 15 of Deuteronomy 28 says what? It says, but it shall come to pass if you do not obey the voice of the Lord your God. If you don't do it, who was he talking to? He was talking to Israel. The law was in operation here. It says, if you don't do it, carefully observe all his commandments and his statutes, which I command you today. He says that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. And it's so interesting. Remember, we're not making anything codified law yet. We're just making some observations. It's interesting that one of the curses that will overtake them has to do with ships in Egypt. Now, you should just simply say, because we haven't established anything yet. Right now, we're just dealing with a little bit of common sense. Once again, considering that if the Bible gives us evidence that Jews were in North Africa, and history gives us evidence that those Jews left North Africa and ended up in West Africa, almost 120 years established before slave traders came to West Africa and took black people to the Americas, this isn't possible. Is it possible? Is it possible that one, let's go with the least, is it possible that one black Jew was in that mix? Now we're done now, so we'll pick up. We'll pick up next week.
Yeah, sorry about that, fam. All right, so one thing we have to understand, okay, because someone had posted, well, you Cobra, why don't you reach out to him? Well, I'm doing that right now. Tell you why. You got to understand, he has a huge ministry. He's well known. There's millions of people sending him emails every day. He's not going to see my email. He might see my video. So, if he wants information, we have information, right? We have information here. Dante Forson has information on his site, right? He has, the Omni Index. He can go and do the research. Now, he says in the video that there had to be at least one. Who's to say there wasn't at least one Israelite in the batch, right? One Israelite came across on that ship. No, I'm saying 99% were Israelites. Why do I say that? But let me show the other video before I get into it, right? Because it's the same argument that urban apologists do. How do you know you're an Israelite? How do you know that the majority of Negroes who came over on the slave ships were Israelites? Well, we're gonna get to that, right? Because it's all about the history. You got to understand the history. And if you don't understand the history, then you won't understand that the majority of those who came on those slave ships were Israelites. But I'm gonna get to that. Let's watch this video. And if y'all want him to hear this, send it to him. Right? Like I told you, I have utmost respect for their ministry. Utmost respect. I can't say that for many Christian ministries. I have the utmost respect for their ministry. Okay. So I don't say that often. All right. So let's continue.
Blood will never, ever lose its power. What an awesome God we serve. Well, let's get into the word. I believe you all are ready. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to reference some comments that I was able to see last week as a result of the message going forth. And these comments are evidence that we're getting new watchers, new viewers, maybe even new trolls every week. And so there were some comments regarding what I said about Africans selling Africans to Europeans. Now, if you remember earlier on in this lesson, as we were taking a look at Deuteronomy 28, specifically that 68th verse that talked about returning to bondage in ships. And there is a running theory that that was a reference to the transatlantic slave trade, which would then mean that those slaves would have been Hebrew Israelites. Now, emphatically, I wholeheartedly believe and don't see how it could be refuted that in West Africa, before the slave trade began, there were Jews. After Assyrian captivity of uh, Israel, and the 10 tribes that are considered lost, of course, the book of Revelation shows us that they definitely are here, present in this world. I believe that all of the groups that we've identified that would be considered Israel, and I don't know if anyone would specifically know, but with all the groups that we've identified, I'm sure we've covered those 10 lost tribes. But after Assyrian captivity, going back to around 730 BC, a little bit after that, many Israelites migrated to North Africa, and from North Africa to West Africa. So you have Jews that set up shop, set up home in North Africa, as well as West, Central, East, and South, different groups. But one of the questions that we ask regarding those from West Africa making their way to this country, of course, by force, is that were they all Hebrew Israelites? It's believed that 12 million to 12.8 million Africans were brought over to this country. Based on the comments that I was reading last week, the assumption is that they were all Hebrew Israelites. I don't know if we can say that with certainty. Now, because they were in West Africa, it would make sense that some would have been taken as well. But I believe it was a mix, an amalgamation of West Africans and West African Jews. Another comment that I saw was that Ham is not the father of the Negroes, and the Negro in this country came from West Africa. Well, that is true. I mentioned to you the Zondervan Compact Study Bible, which highlights, they don't elaborate on it, they don't go into further detail, but it highlights that Ham did not father the Negroes. That only leaves Shem. Now, we prove that by way of Epher, one of the sons of Midian, a son of the union of Abraham and Keturah in Genesis 25. We made distinctions between what it means biblically to be a Hebrew, an Israelite, and a Jew. We went through all of that in detail. However, it could be a stretch to believe that only Africans sold Hebrew Israelites to Europeans to be brought over to this country. Now, here's why I say that. I want to introduce you to two websites. I think you should go check these out on your own time. One in particular, slavevoyages.org. Slavevoyages.org. Did you know that you can go online and look at the slave databases? Slavevoyages.org. Let me read you a little bit about this particular website and what they do. Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. The Transatlantic Slave Trade Database now comprises 36,000 individual slaving expeditions between 1514 and 1866. Records of the voyages have been found in archives and libraries throughout the Atlantic world. They provide information about vessels, routes, and the people associated with them, both enslaved and enslavers. Sources are cited for every voyage included. Users may search for information about a specific voyage or group of voyages. The website provides full interactive capability to analyze the data and report results in the form of statistical tables, graphs, maps, a timeline, and an animation. That's slavevoyages.org. Another section within the website, Intra-American Slave Trade Database. The Intra-American Slave Trade Database contains information on approximately 10,000 slave voyages within the Americas. These voyages operated within colonial empires across imperial boundaries and inside the borders of nations such as the United States and Brazil. The database enables users to explore the contours of the enormous New World slave trade, which not only dispersed African survivors of the Atlantic crossing, but also displaced and enslaved people born in the Americas. Now, here's the section I spent a little time on yesterday, and that is the African Names Database. The African Names Database. Once again, this website is slavevoyages.org. The African Names Database. The African Names Database provides personal details of 91,491 Africans taken from captured slave ships or from African trading sites. It displays the African name, age, gender, origin, country, and places of embarkation and disembarkation of each individual. Now, it is believed that the 12 million to 12.8 million West Africans brought over to this country, that anywhere between 2 and 4 million died during the voyage to the Americas. This African Names Database highlights 91,000. We know there were more than 91,491 Africans taken, but this does give us something to work with. Now, you can go on this website, you can access the database, and you can see a list of names. I didn't have time to look at 91,000 names, but I did look at a few. I looked at a few in the beginning of the database and at the end. Interestingly, I saw no Hebrew names. Now, here's what we have to remember about Hebrew culture, about the Hebrew people. They pass traditions on, generation to generation. You're not a Jew, you're not an Israelite, you're not a Hebrew, and you forget who your fathers are. That doesn't happen. So interestingly, if West Africans or the West Africans that were taken to the Americas were only and only Hebrew Israelites, then these databases should be listed with names that are of Hebrew origin only.
All right, I'm gonna stop it right there, family. So you notice what he said. He said that the slavevoyages.org website doesn't have any Hebrew Israelite name. That's what he said, right? And he said that, they would not have forgotten who their ancestors were. And so as you listen to this video, he goes on, he talks about Olaudah Equiano. And he says, see, even Olaudah's name isn't Hebrew. Well, yes, it is. Olaudah, see, they got to understand that there's such a thing as transliteration. There's such a thing as transliteration. And Olaudah, and you can get some of my African brothers in here, is tied to the word Yahuda or Judah or Ouida, as the French called it, right? So I'm listening, and he tells me that there are no Israelite names, and he looked for them, a few. He couldn't search them all, and he could not find them. Now, before we get started, we're gonna look at, and guess what, family? I mean, for all of you who are, I'm gonna use the Japanese word senpais, right? Senpai, you're mature, you're more well-rounded historically and biblically about who Israel is. Some of this stuff is like 101 for you, right? And I understand that he may be in the area of 101. So, he's in the introductory class, he's learning. Now, remember, 2 Chronicles, if my people which are called what? By my name. So what do we know? We know that God's people they're called by his name. I told you this is 101 for the Israelites. All the Israelites know this already, especially the ones who follow this ministry. All right. What is his name? Sing unto Yah, or sing unto God, sing praises to his name, extol him that rideth upon the heavens by his name, Jah. Now, that, of course, that's a transliteration of what? Of the word what? Yah. It's a transliteration of the word Yah. So Israelites know all this. This is Israelite 101. So his name is Yah. His people are known by his name, which is like Isaiah, Micaiah. All right. So we know that his people are called by his name. But he told us that there are no Israelite names in the slave voyages database. Now, like I said, Israel, this is 101 for you. Enya, Yahoo, Akenya, Anya, Henya, Benaya, Hoya, Anya, Enya, Ta, Yahoo, Kuya. Can we go on? And shall we look again for his people called by his name? Thank you, Musica, for the gift. So we have others in the slave database. Olofaya. See, understand we're dealing with transliterations, right? And the rewording of the same, right? Makaya, Olofaya, Mia, Dusai, a whole bunch of Israelite names. Isaiah. I'm just asking. There's a whole bunch of slaves with Yah in their name. If my people who are called by my name, what is his name? His name is Yah. And there's a ton of Africans who's in this database with a slave name called Yah. I'm not hating on the brother. I told you, I respect him. I respect his ministry. I have literally nothing bad to say about Ever Increasing Faith. I have nothing bad to say about them. I respect them because they pursue truth and they teach their congregations. Now, I don't know if maybe he's slowly bringing them into the truth. Maybe he's still learning himself. That's possible. But understand that if you know the history of the Israelites, you will understand why the people they targeted were Israelites only. Could some Hamites have been caught up in that? Could some Egyptians have been caught up in that? Mizraim, yeah, that's possible. But the majority were Israelites, as we saw in the database. Yah, Isaiah, Yah. There's a whole bunch of names with Hebrew names. And understand that those names are transliterated by people who spoke English. So everybody knows this map, right? This was what? The kingdom of Judah or Weda. Now, some people tell you that Weda, Judah don't mean that they're Israelites, but we showed you, we got the videos. If you don't believe it, go look in our list of videos and see where we proved that Weda or Judah means Israelites. We proved it. So if they targeted the slave coast, and the slave coast was called the kingdom of Judah, and Judah lives there, then the majority of people who were taken were Judah. And we see that in the scriptures too. We see that in the scriptures that Judah was the one scattered amongst the nations as slaves. We see that the northern tribes, the Bible refers to as Israel, most of them were still on the continent. But guess what? They were enslaved in their own land. It's called colonization. We all know this map, right? This map is the heirs of Johann Baptist Hohmann in Nuremberg, 1743 map. Thank you, Dunel Exit, for the gift. We know this map, And what does this map show? It shows the kingdom of Judah. So they go in to the slave coast where the kingdom of Judah is to take slaves. And so you're going to say, well, how do you know some of the Hamites didn't get caught up in that? And how do you know that they did not take, some of the Cushites and the Hamites and the Canaanites and all these other people who might be there, the Edomites? How do you know they didn't take them? And well, this was the kingdom of Judah. This is where Judah lived. Now, here's the thing. The Pope, who started all this mess, he says that you can only take people into slavery south of Cape Borger. The Pope said you can only take slaves south of Cape Borger. Why did he say south of Cape Borger? Why not the whole continent of Africa? Well, as we go, I mean, we know the history, but let's read this. The Cape Borger is a promontory on the northwest coast of Africa, south of the Canary Islands, and is part of the present-day Western Sahara. So that's south of the Sahara. The Cape Borger forms the western foothills of the mountain Jebel el Aswad in the Sahara and was for a long time in the Middle Ages as the western end of the world. Here are the up to 130 meters high snow dunes. Okay, so let's go down. So here's Cape Borger right here. You see that on the map? Everything south of Cape Borger. Now, Brother Fred had mentioned about, how the Zondervan dictionary stated that, the Negro is not hand. Now, understand that in ancient times, the people who were considered Berbers were the Negroes. We've showed you that. The ancient Berbers were Negroes, which is why in some of the historical documents within America, like in what is the name of the place? I'm going blank right now. It'll come to me. But I showed you where the people who were to be enslaved were Negroes, and the people who were to be enslaved were Berbers. The ancient Berbers were called Negroes. If you don't believe me, just go look at my history, all of the teachings we got about who Israel is. So my brother, and I'm going to call him my brother because I respect him. I respect Fred Price Jr. I respect his dad. I respect the ministry. My brother, Fred, says that we cannot prove that the majority of those taken were Israelites. No, yes, we can. Because we know they went to the slave coast. What is on the slave coast? Slaves. What area was the slave coast? It was the kingdom of Judah. He stated that there weren't any Israelite names in the slave voyages database, but we show that there are Israelite names in the slave voyager database. Now, understand this. As we have learned, as we have grown, we've learned a lot of things. What did we learn? We learned that a lot of our people used to live in Europe, used to live in Spain and Portugal. They were identified as black. We look at the whole history of how they've been persecuted and tortured during the Inquisition. There's even a mass grave there with people with their hands tied behind their backs, who they call Africans, who were killed. But we know that according to history, they passed a law in Portugal and Spain that you could no longer call them Jews, so they called us Negro, which is a Portuguese word that means black. What else do we know? We know that if they did not convert to Catholicism, they were either killed or they were sent to Sao Tome, which was a prison island, which is where they grew sugarcane. Not only were they sent to Sao Tome, some of them who got out early were sent to Angola. Where's Angola? That is in Africa. Where did many of the slaves come from? Angola. They came from Central Africa. They even came from parts of East Africa, south of the Sahara, south of Cape Borger. So they tell us that it was not a majority of Israelites who were enslaved. I ask you to prove that statement. Prove that statement. You said that the majority taken were not Israelites. Prove that statement. I have more evidence that the majority taken were Israelites than not. And if any of them weren't Israelites, by the time all of this was over and this mixing, they became Israelites. We've been in there for 400 years in this nation. You cannot take a whole bunch of people from the same area, the same nation, and not think that the majority of them was the people of that nation. But I understand that it's the politically correct thing to say, well, we don't know. We only know that there was only a few who may have been Israelites. We must admit that some may have been Israelites. No, the majority were Israelites. They targeted the Israelites. We can go and look at the history and what happened and how the Portuguese was behind it all and how the Pope gave them the authority to go ahead and enslave us all. What? Perpetually. Which is why we're still slaves today. So my point being is this. If we're going to talk about the existence of a Hebrew Israelite or Jews in Western Africa or south of the Sahara or south of Cape Borger, as the Pope said, we need to be specific on who these people were, where they came from, because it was not the entire continent that was taking slaves. It was all those people that you see today who are south of the Sahara, who happens to have a Hebrew Israelite history and tradition. Now, let's look at it this way as well. So we got this history, but we also now have DNA. So the majority, and I'm not talking about this E1B1A mess. I'm not going to go in there. You believe what you want. But the majority have autosomal connections to the Limba, autosomal connections to Nigeria, autosomal connections to the Igbo, all who have Israelite traditions. And the majority of their DNA connects to those Israelites. So if the majority of the people in the Americas, and I'm not just talking about the United States, the Americas, the islands as well, if the majority of those people tie back to Israelite tribes in Africa, then we know the majority of the people who were taken were Israelites. How can my DNA look like Pastor Kelly's? How can my DNA look like Sister E's? How can my DNA look like all these other Israelites who you see Limba, you see Israelite, you see Jew, you see all of this, you see the same thing, and the majority not be Israelites? Come on now. I'm just saying. So I wanted to bring this to you because here's the thing. Like I said, I'm not hating. Much respect to Brother Fred Price Jr. for even talking about it. Much respect for going into the history of there being African Jews on the continent. Much respect to him for realizing that many of those who were in the transatlantic slave trade were Israelites. Much respect. Because 99% of the pastors out there ain't even talking about it. 99% of the people out there who are pastors are ignoring it, even though they know the truth. So I'm going to give shout out to Pastor Fred Price Jr. for doing the work, for teaching the truth, which is why I like his ministry, which is why I like his dad. I don't have nothing bad to say about him, other than the fact I think he should dig a little deeper. So I want to thank you all for listening. And I want to thank those who gave, right? I really appreciate the gifts. And understand, share this, right? Because, he might watch it, he might not watch it. It's all in love. I respect the brother. I consider him an Israelite. I consider him a brother. I'm not looking at him like I look at some of these other Christians. I'm looking at him as a person who loves the Lord and his father who loves truth. That's how I look at him. Always did. Much respect. I ain't got nothing bad to say about him. Nothing. Just wanted to put this out there. Love y'all. Love you with the love of the Messiah, family. Go ahead and share this video and give me some likes. So hopefully very soon, I'm hoping and praying the Exodus happens soon. I'm just feeling it in my spirit. I hope I'm right. Right. So peace and blessings, Israel. Your captivity is ending. Love you with the love of the Messiah.